Hey, Whammy. You know what I've never done? I don't think I've ever kind of went down the lifeline of the Whammy Gunslinger. To know my background, to know, uh, you know, how do I know what I know? How experienced am I? That kind of thing. So, in other words, let me introduce myself, right? I don't think I got 100 videos. I've never introduced myself. So let me introduce myself. All right. So and a lot of this that I'm actually about to talk about, it actually is in the book that I'm writing, right? That at the moment is called The Concealed Carrier. So my I come from a background of parents who are big in firearms. My mother, her three siblings, my grandfather on my mom's side, grandmother, uh, grandpa was in World War II and Korea. Grandpa was big time hunter, big time self defense. Uh, Mom would tell me stories back in the day when they were poor. Grandpa would go in the kitchen, flick on the lights. There'd be a couple of mice, rats. He'd take his 357 Magnum and with those shell shots, and he'd shoot them. Like that's bananas. Why are you shooting in Grandpa? Why are you shooting the house? It sounds crazy, especially today, but back then, just a different time. Um, that was in the 50s, early 60s. And anyway, I don't know a whole lot about that. I would just hear about it, hear little stories here and there. But my grandpa was just big on guns. So big, in fact, well, I get around to that. But remember Grandpa. Grandpa's a huge part of who I am. Okay. So mom, they say that people uh, tend to marry someone that is similar to their parent of the opposite sex, right? Like my wife is very similar to my mom, or I'm very similar to my wife's dad, right? And maybe in these specific areas that mean the most to that person. And so my mom and dad have been together since my mom was 13 and my dad was 14. That's serious. They're still married. Um, and they had my brother young, back then, if you have a kid at that age, you cannot leave. Like it was different mentality back then, So my mom had my brother at basically 16 and my dad was 17. So my when she met my dad though, my dad was a big hunter, like her father, right? My dad was a huge hunter. He went out, he was born in Arkansas, raised down in the back country. I'm talking about the deep south, like the deep south, southern Arkansas, like backwoods for like it's backwoods now. Okay, 2019, 2020, it is deep south now, right? So, yeah, he would go out and shoot birds all day with his 22. First his pellet gun, killing birds all day. Then he got a 22, and he was so good at shooting that his dad would brag on him and make bets with his friends. Like, I bet you my 10-year-old son can outshoot any of you fools, and he make money like that. So my mom, she met this guy who had these hound dogs and would go hunting all the time and go out in the woods shooting. So he was familiar to her. He made sense to her. You understand what I'm saying? So that's where I come from. And then it'll start making sense. Well, I don't know, wonder this guy's a gun nut. Like it all makes sense. Um, so then boom, they're together, married, blah, blah, blah. They have my brother. My brother's 9.5 years older than me. Well, my brother was young, real young, like 3. Um, Unfortunately, my dad had to take a man's life in a home invasion type of deal. He never really did a day in jail or anything over it. Um, he was 38 special, shot from down here, okay, as he was being attacked. Bullet hit in here, exited out, went up into the ceiling. And so it was easy for the police to see that this was an attack and my father was retreating and, self defense type thing. Anyway, um, not even a year later, the person that my father shot, that his brother shot my dad from over a mile, not a, excuse me, out of over 100 yards out. I believe it was 100, around 150 yards from like in an attic, I believe it was, with a 30-06. And my dad was tying his shoes when he stood up. The shot went off, and it blew out his hip, basically. Exit was around this area down here. If you can't see me, not right here. So anyway, let's speed through all that because that's in the book. But I just want you to understand that, self-defense, guns, hunting, war, that is all in my DNA. Thick, right? Like from both sides, like I can't escape it, right? Both my grandma and grandpa had guns on my dad's side. Both my grandma and grandpa had guns on my mom's side. And then both my parents have guns till this day, multiple. And so let's just skip forward here. When I'm about 8 years old, well, 7 or 8, I always go with 8. When I was about 8 years, well, let me rewind here. Before even I shot a gun, my dad had what was called the Shooter's Bible, right? So when I was younger, when I was, shoot, 6 to 11 or 12, I would always be in his Shooter's Bibles, and I would circle the guns I was going to buy when I got older. Me and my little god brother. And so I knew a lot about guns at an early age because I would be reading the Shooter's Bible. So I'm this 8 year old or 7 year old who knows all this stuff about guns, talking to my buddies who don't know what the hell, like, what are you talking about? And with that, I always had, like, when we would play cops and robbers or when any kind of game that had to do with guns, I don't care if it's squirt guns or just fake, pow, pow, gotcha, you're dead, what kids do. What people call the pew pew life. Well, I call it the wham wham life because I would always say, wham, 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 wham. I would make a wham noise, wham sound, which is where whammy comes from. Okay. So anyhow, at around 8 years old, I shot my first gun. I shot my mom's 357 Magnum with 38s. But I shot my mom's 357 Magnum, Smith and Wesson, Colt Python. Oh my God, the wooden handle on that thing was just sick. And I was good from the jump. I mean, from the jump, I was good. I started putting up nickels, and shooting those. I was a good shot from the beginning, even though I had bad eyes my whole life. Like, I'm nearsighted, but my near vision is immaculate. My, my far vision is bad, so I need glasses when I'm driving. But anything up close, like I can read, the smallest little prints, Now I'm starting to get older. My eyes are starting to go a little bit. But when it comes to sights, I see so well close. This is why I don't change out sights on my Glocks. Everybody's like, why you got those horrible, factory sights? I pick up any gun and any sight that it has on it. It's okay with me. I'm just so comfortable with any type of sighting system because I shoot everything and you just deal with what you got. I mean, understand, I'm shooting, I'm looking through cap guns, squirt guns, you name it. Like, revolvers back in the day had the worst sights to me. So all these sights are easy for me and they make sense to me. And again, I'm nearsighted. So all of it is makes sense to me and I don't need to upgrade it in any type of way. Well, anyway, I also shot the Remington 22 pump action. I think that's about it. The 22, my mom's 38 special, I believe, is all I shot that day. It's the first time I ever shot at 8 years old. And from there forward, the family always had yearly target practicing things. We go out to the woods and we go shoot, have a good time, have some food, and we just have a good time. And that was pretty much yearly. The other thing that we did is every New Year's Eve, we would go out and we shoot our guns in the air. Now, this is before it was like a big thing to, like, don't shoot your gun in the air because the bullets are going to come down. Around that time, nobody had ever heard of someone getting hit with a falling bullet. Okay. This is back in the 80s, the early 90s. That just wasn't, it was normal. Everyone did that. Everyone came outside and shot in the air for New Year's Eve. Okay. And it was a tradition. We always made sure we did it. And it was fun. I looked forward to it. And what happened is my friends, when I was growing up, my friends knew that we had the most artillery in the neighborhood. And so sometimes my friends would be able to come over. And the first time that a lot of my friends shot a gun was over at my house at New Year's Eve. All right. So there's that. So then eventually it came to time where my dad's like, all right, I want to take my son hunting. And my dad drilled safety into me. I need you to understand, before I even shot that gun at 8 years old, he drilled safety into me until it was bananas, right? Like, it was, to me, it was almost torture, man. Like, he drilled, I couldn't escape it. It was not a fun process for me. Because it was like, I got it. But it was like, nah, like he would drill and drill. And I love the fact that he did that because safety is number one. None of this stuff makes sense. None of this stuff makes any sense if you do not understand to a T firearm safety. That's the biggest thing. All right. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. You suck. You're horrible. Okay. You need to have your firearm safety down pat. So anyway, in this state, in order to go hunting, you have to, if you were born after 1972, you have to take a hunter's certification course. And so, um, my dad took me when I was 11 or 12. I always used to say 12. I always used to go with the higher number. I don't know why, but I was 11 or 12 years old, and so my dad took me to a hunter certification course. I believe it was about 2 weeks. It was far away, man. Like we lived in Seattle, and this was in Bothell. Um, and so it was a pretty long drive. But I don't remember if it was every day, every other day. I don't remember, but it was. I went to that class a lot in those 2 weeks, and I had to go home and study and study that book, and then go in and finally we would do the test, the written test, and then we went and did the shooting test. And I'll never forget that. In the writing test, I did okay. I'm just not good at. I was never good at tests at all. I would get bored with it. It wasn't even that I didn't understand. It's just I didn't care. I don't know. Anyway, the shooting test, man, I did the best and didn't get no props, and it was wild. Like the kids under 10 shot at 50 yards. The kids over the age of 10 shot at 100. So I shot at 100, and I was the only one of the kids over the age of 10 who hit the bullseye at 100. And so there was a kid that was almost directly next to me. He was younger, he was 9. He shot the bullseye at 50. Everyone's, oh, great job. And they were like jumping. And then I shoot the bullseye at 100. And my dad's like, oh, he got the bullseye. It's like one guy's like, hey, good job, buddy. It's like, okay, whatever. Is it because we're 2 years apart? I don't know, but that's something I always remember. You know, my dad was a little like upset with that, but he's like, don't worry about it. Like, you know what you just did. You know, and plus he taught me, to have self-esteem. My self-esteem to always be up, know how great you are. You know, kind of a thing. So anyway, so I got my hunter certification around 11 or 12 years old. So then, boom, I'm hunting. You know, from that age forward, every single year, and then at the age of 14 or 15. I got my first kill, got my first elk. All right, and I'll never forget the feeling. Now, my dad. Let me rewind. My dad for my first hunting trip. Before that hunting trip, my dad bought me a 270 Browning A bolt. I still have that gun. Um, I love that gun, man. The eventually the extractor broke on it. I took it to the best gunsmiths you can think of, and they were like, "This got to go to Browning." So I still haven't done it, but I need to get a maybe a new bolt, right? For that gun and the magazine. I need to get another magazine. But anyway, that was my first gun. You know, around the age of 12 years old, 11 or 12, and I used my dad wanted a gun that wasn't too strong but wasn't too weak, something that was strong enough to drop an elk but not too much recoil for someone who was small. I was bones. I was bones, man. I was a bony, skinny little dude, man. You know, so. But I was strong. That's the thing. You know, I was shooting 30-06 or 7mm magnums at 12 and 13. All right. I was eating it. Um, so I got my first elk around 14, 15. And, you know, from there on, it's the same old thing. Oh, my grandpa. We're going back to my grandpa. I told you we're going back to grandpa. Switch guns for no reason. Um, grandpa, a monster, man. Grandpa lived way out in Shoreline while we were living in Seattle. And grandpa had a really nice house. He had a nice mobile home, right? I missed a lot of things. Like before I was born, grandpa used to take the whole family, you know, out to Moses Lake. He had a boat, and, you know, so I didn't do a lot of fishing with grandpa. Is one thing that I missed. That sucks. But I did a lot of hunting with grandpa. So there was years dad didn't even go. It was just me and grandpa. I mean, there was probably 7 years of the random throughout the years where it was just me and grandpa, maybe 5. Um, but around 12 years old, grandpa took me. He had cut out this wall in his house, right? Grandpa, he not no joke. He cut out a wall in his house, man, and it was probably about from here, not exactly here to the wall. It was about, well, let's say this. It was about beginning here. That wall probably was about right here is where that wall stopped, something like that. It wasn't very big a room, but he cut it out, and he had a rack up there. And I remember he had 5 rifles, 5 shotguns, a couple of his pistols, and just all reloading stuff. Okay, so at 12 years old, grandpa took me in there and he showed me how to reload, how to make ammo. And so because I was the only grandkid that knew the code to the lock to his gun room, the only one, because I was so involved, you know, in grandpa and dad's adventures, man. I was the one there, like, hard. And so he taught me how to reload, and I would go in there whenever I go to Grandpa's house. He'd be like, "Hey, uh, you know what time it is? Hunting season's in a couple of months. We need to go make sure everything's still straight, make sure everything's nice and sighted in still. This year we're going to sight it for 200, whatever. And so I had to go up there and I had to make, ammo for the 270, make ammo for the 7mm Magnum, make ammo for the 7mm Mauser, for the 30-06. So, I was up there reloading, man, like crazy. And in the beginning, I was like, this was fun because I'm, making ammo, hell. But then it came to a point where it's like, "Ah, I don't feel like doing this. But I would do it because I was the youngest, and get your young butt up there and get to work. So I was doing that also. So I was very, very much hands on, man, with guns at a very young age. And then you need to understand that, again, this is Grandpa's two wars. He was wounded twice. He was shot twice. Um, and I just told you about the story with my dad. So it's on both sides of my family. So not just hunting, but self-defense. Like, all this stuff is very, very, very serious. It's real in my family. It's not something you just talk about. It happened, right? We lived through this. Like, it's serious. And so when I'm talking to you guys, and I'm saying these things, and now you understand, like, this isn't just some guy, right? I'm not just some random guy that just happened to like guns and thinks he knows what he's talking about because I read some books or something. I really lived through this stuff, right? And first of all, before I even went through anything, the people who taught me everything lived through it. And they taught me these things. They taught me about self-defense. They taught me how to think when it comes to self-defense. You understand? So, um, eventually I come of my own age, and once I get to be able to buy a handgun, I actually didn't buy a handgun until I was 22, believe it or not. Um, you'd have thought as soon as I was 21 I'd have got one, but I didn't. I waited an extra year for no particular reason. I was just kind of living life, more focused on, like, girls or something. I don't know. But at 22, I got my handgun, and uh, at the same time, my best buddy had bought a gun, and I had bought a Taurus 24/7. He bought a Llama 1911. We kind of stuck to that. My second gun, had bought the Glock 17. He had bought a Kimber 1911 when Kimber was the shit. So anyway, and then after that, a lot of the stories I have on here, things have happened, you know, uh, attempted robberies I had to stop, at gunpoint, and a lot of other things. People trying to, you know, threaten me or shoot at me, whatever. 12 gauges put to my forehead. I've been through it, and and not because I was never a bad person ever. In fact, out of all my friends, I was probably more the square out of anybody. You know, maybe to someone outside of the hood, I'm not a square, but to my friends, I was the square ist. Let's say that. All right, I'm reading books, and I'm like a nerd with certain things, guns especially. I played sports a lot. I was serious with basketball, very serious. So average kid. Bikes. I used to build bikes. I love bikes and stuff like that. But guns was my first passion, and I always had the most guns when we would go play. Cops and robbers and whatnot. I had more cap guns, laser guns, water guns than anybody in the neighborhood. So much so that when we got ready to play, even if I wasn't playing, my friends would come over to my house, knock on the door, and ask me if they can borrow my guns because I had crates of freaking guns. This is serious. Okay, so that's where all this stuff comes from. And then in 2006, I started working at a gun store. And in 2007, it was just a few months at the gun store, and then I started working at the gun range, which is right next door, and was the range master there. And I worked from 2006 to 2012. I worked there, and I became the head range master. It was my world back there, and whenever new people would come in, I had to train them, and they kind of had to do things my way, right? It was my show, and had to clean all those guns by hand. We didn't have the electronic thing. Every gun had to be cleaned by hand, from the long guns to the handguns, and every gun that malfunctioned, they had to come out and get the range master. That was the rules there. So understand, I'm clearing guns every day, like a lot. So that's why I so familiar with the firearms that are reliable and that are not. I seen what guns I had to go clear the most. I seen what the problem was, right? And then I was able to work with one of the greatest gunsmiths that we've ever seen, especially since hell, since the 1980s. Mr. Peter Dunn. Um, Mr. Peter Dunn was the chief engineer at Detonics. He was the head gunsmith at the gun range I worked at, gun store range. And me and him had a great relationship. Whenever he fixed a gun and bring it down, I took it out to test fire it. So I shot a lot of guns, man. Plus, I was one of those kind of people that love to. I had no problem asking if I could shoot your gun. So as a range master, when I'm walking through to make sure everything's good, if I seen a gun that was dope, I'd go over there. Oh my God, nice gun! Yeah, shoot it. I've shot, I've shot so many guns. It's bananas, man. So um, yeah, that's another. That's where a lot of the like I already had all this information. I had all this experience, but then when I worked at the gun store and gun range, it almost like tripled, right? So yeah, that's where all this comes from. Um, I'm not like a lot of people that you may watch online that their first time shooting they were 20 something or they were in their uh, late teens or whatever. I was born into this. Okay, I was born into this lifestyle, and it's with me, and it'll be like that for the rest of my life. And my whole life is dedicated to it. Because if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't be alive on more than one occasion, even before I was born. So I know I've taught you guys to death, but I just want to run through that whole thing of who I am, where I came from, where I got my information, and why am I Mr. Whammy Gunslinger. So that's that. Whammy out.